Hey, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and I am here for another episode, our fifth episode of Nabors Speaks, right here at Second Baptist, and we are going to dive into the value of a black man. Pastor Nabors gave a sermon this past Sunday about the value of the black man, and also a tribute to Aretha Franklin, and people were in tears, but it was just tears of just feeling good and feeling inspired and wanting to go out there and do more. So, the black man is always on my heart. So the value in a black man is so important. We just had, 60 more shootings this past weekend. And I believe it's all about a young black man feeling value in himself. If he doesn't feel the value in himself, then he doesn't see value in others. And, of course, I think the NRA has a lot to do with why those guns are being passed out on the south and west side of Chicago to prove some sort of point about gun laws. But, that's a whole nother show that we'll get into another time. But I'm going to turn this camera around to Pastor Nabors, and we're going to dive into the value of a black man because it's so important, so important. All right. Hi, hello. Pastor Nabors.
Hello, Malika. Good to be here.
Yes. So, goodness, your sermon this past Sunday, wow. I want people to go back to the archives of the live broadcast and check it out because it was very, very moving. So if you want to give people an overview of what you were talking about this past Sunday in terms of the value.
Sure. Well, one of the things I want our listeners to know is that what we did was we preached a sermon that is leading up to our annual Men's Day, which is next Sunday. So during the weeks going up to Men's Day, we tried to focus on subjects and topics that are going to be germane, particularly to men in the congregation. And since we are a predominant African American congregation, I wanted to focus on African American men. And so in yesterday's sermon, we did understanding the role of man, and we took a text out of the New Testament to talk about John the Baptist. And John the Baptist, he knew who he was, he knew what he had to do, and then he did it. And those were the 3 points of the sermon, that for every man, and particularly in this day and age, for every African American man, if you don't know who you are, then you are not going to know what you're supposed to do, and you won't be able to do it. So the real critical piece in this day and age is knowing who you are. You mentioned the number of shootings that occurred in Chicago once again over this weekend. So we know that the great majority of those shootings are with African American men shooting other African American men. So there is a devaluing of the sanctity and the honor of what it means to be a man, when you can easily point a gun at someone else and take the life of that person or reduce their quality of life through life-threatening injury. Then you know that as an individual you have lost something. There's a disconnect, and we have disconnected ourselves. And I don't think that it's I don't think it's by accident. I don't think that we are fully responsible for the disconnect. I think it comes from history. I think it comes from society. I think it comes from the present politics, where we have a president and others who are in Congress who are race baiting and playing the race game, where people of color and especially black men are victims. And so what we have to do then, and what I said in the sermon, is we have to figure out how we can build relationships with one another, particularly old men who have figured out how to survive in this world, and not just survive, but to survive, to have joy, to bring home the bacon to the family, to have a loving relationships with their wives and children and all of that. We have to figure out, I think, how to share that with this next generation that is coming along. And I used a couple of examples, biblical and also historical, about men influencing one another. Abraham's father influenced Abraham, that made him leave the comfort of his own home and go into a strange land, where he wound up being very successful. And of course, David, the great king of Israel, was influenced by his own father Jesse, and then he wound up influencing his own son Solomon. So we have biblical examples, but we also have, Socrates influencing Aristotle, and Plato influencing Aristotle. You can't be a great man.
Wow. So people have gone into the community and tried to talk to, these young men. I mean, like your son is fortunate. He has you.
Yeah.
So you instill that value, and we can all see that he's been with Pierce. Okay, so, but the young men who are not fortunate to have black male figure, it seems like it has to be some sort of hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like driving through the south side, west side of Chicago, even the north side. There's been some incidents here on the north side. I mean, it's starting to get pretty bad.
Indeed.
What do we do? Do we just actually walk up to them? I feel like we need to do something that radical.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me say.
Talk to him.
Yeah, I agree. Malika is an incoming freshman at ETHS. I'm happy that you say we don't have to worry about him, but because he is a young black male. And while we in the church are familiar with Pierce, and while he may have a concentric circle that is familiar to him, as soon as he gets outside of that arc of familiar, he's 5 feet 11 inches tall and 180 pounds and has a mustache and sideburns that are longer than mine. And so my concern, not just with Pierce, but with all of our black boys, is that when they are outside of their arc, then they are exposed to all of the, and then the other piece that you talked about.
Well, I was more concerned. Well, I was saying we don't have to worry about Pierce picking up a gun.
Amen. Yeah, prayerfully.
We don't have no.
Right. Prayerfully. Yeah. I believe that he won't get that from me or from his family. That's for sure. But but then let me say the other thing that you mentioned, which is what we need to do something massive. What are we going to do with these young people? Well, the key is we can't just think that it's okay to take a day or to take a day out of a month or to take a day out of a year and do something special with our black men. With all due respect to the Million Man March, which I think was the most profound experience that black men have ever had in the United States, it was a one-day event that occurred over 20 years ago. And while Minister Farrakhan and all of the others who were leaders challenged the men to go back to their communities and to begin to build the process of relationships and all of that, there was no follow-through. So we didn't have a massive follow-through. So all of the encouragement and all of the motivation and inspiration that men felt that day in Washington, D.C. sort of was limited to that day and sort of, basking in the afterglow for a few weeks after that. But we came to find out that those communities wound up experiencing the same old problems. So now we're talking about Chicago, which is the home of Minister Louis Farrakhan, having all of these issues and all of these problems. So you're right on the money when you say that something has to be done. It has to be massive. But Malika, it has to be something that builds on continuity. Not only do we have to go where these young men are, and that's part of the problem, because a lot of men don't want to go there because they are out there where the rubber hits the road. They are not only in the streets and in the alleys and in the neighborhoods that are filled with guns and filled with gang violence, but it's filled with a sense of such hopelessness. So individual men, they're not safe in terms of being able to go out there. So we have to figure out how can we approach the young men where they are, because they're not going to come to church. They're not going to come to a community service that's held at the community center on their behalf. That's not going to happen with them. So we have to begin to engage in a sort of open line of communication where they are. And by doing that, I think we begin to maybe break down some of the walls of division that have been built among us. And it's going to have to be massive. So my challenge for anybody that's listening to this right now, especially for those brothers who are listening, my challenge to all of us is that we have to break down the barriers. We are not successful, and we are not really being caretakers of our community if we have not made an effort to reach out and make a difference in young men's lives, beyond our own children, beyond our own extended family, somebody that we don't know, a neighborhood that we may not be familiar with. We've got to figure out how we can do that. And the only way we can do it, Malika, is we have to come together. And I'm not talking about, religious people coming together per se. I'm not talking about Baptists coming together or AME or whatever. We have to put all of that down, and we have to come together as black men. And in my estimation, that means that Christian black men have to lock arms with Muslim black men who have to lock arms with men that don't believe in anything or anybody. And in the pursuit of goodwill, we have to go and cross the street and say, we are here to try to help you to move from where you are to where you want to be. And I think that dialogue will begin to make some real things happen. And that has to be en masse. We can't just concentrate on Chicago. The black men, you see, the black men in Evanston have to concentrate on the black boys in Evanston. The black men in Chicago have to concentrate on the black boys in Chicago. The black men in Detroit have to concentrate on the black boys in Detroit. And it goes on and on. And I think that, and then of course, and I might be challenged here, but I'm going to say it, then we have to figure out how we can move from just black men reaching black boys to men reaching black boys, to men reaching boys. We have to start with where we are because that's how God made us, but we have to also keep in mind that our horizons expand, that we're all caught up in a mutual web of interdependence, you see. So the success of white people is boys growing up and contributing to the world really is going to be an indication of how successful our society is going to become. You can't lock us all up. You can't kill us all. What you have to do is you have to tear down all of those things that are locking us up and killing us and begin to build within us this sense of infinite possibility of being everything that God wants us to be. Yeah, I know I'm talking a lot. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm excited about the topic.
I'm hearing everything that you're saying, and yes, we need to do that. I'm just, when are we going to do it?
Yes. Yeah.
When are we going to do it? Because the body count is just getting truly out of control. So I'm envisioning, when you were saying that, I was envisioning men locking arms and literally walking down the street and walking up to young men and saying, how can I help you? Is that how you see it happening?
It is. And let me say this, Malika, because I think that one of the things that mass media does is mass media brings the spotlight on this issue of black men in such a way where it makes it appear that nothing is happening, that we are just sort of imploding, that we're killing ourselves. What that mass media is not doing, Malika, is focusing on some of the very successful programs that we have already. And you know about them. You know about the all-black male academy in Chicago that graduates 100% of its students, and 100% of its students go on to institutions of higher education. You know about that. You know about the Officer and a Gentleman Academy, which exists right here in Evanston, that is making a difference in the lives of some of our young black boys. You know about the Chessmen's Club in Evanston that's over 50 years old, that's making a difference in the lives of many of our black boys. You know about FAM, which is one of the most successful summer basketball leagues in the United States of America, founded by black men for black boys. So whenever mass media comes along and says, well, the black community isn't doing anything for its black boys, and that's why they're killing each other, what that media chooses to do is to focus on the shootings rather than focus on the programs. If you focus on the programs and those people who are out in the street killing each other, guess what they might do? They might be able to say, there is a program that's aimed at trying to make a difference in my life. There are people that care about me and folks like me. But instead, the media very subtly, but I think in a very racist way, they turn those cameras away from all of the programs that we have that are working, and they decide to focus on the negative. And as an example, just this summer, the local chapter of the NAACP here in Evanston, I'm proud to be the president. We brought on 33 brand new members who were boys and girls. And that's just phenomenal. We're a small community, but that's what we did. And we did it because there was a program that was centered and focused on our children and trying to get them to understand the possibilities that they have. You know, they can be anything that they want to be. They can rise as high as they reach. You know, anything that they dream can come to fruition. And that is with a community of folks who are supporting and loving and caring and helping them to grow.
Okay, so we need to get more programs out there in terms of the media.
We do.
So that these young men know you do have somewhere to go.
We do.
And be fed spiritually and get that value in you.
We do, and that's important. And Malika, of course, you know, it's not just saying that we have the programs. It's almost like saying that we have. It's almost like saying that we have the church. I'm not sure if Victor Hugo's adage is correct for this day and age. The writer said, "If a man can build a better mousetrap, the world will make a beaten path to his doorstep. You know, wherever he is." I'm not sure that's true anymore. I think it was true maybe 150 years ago or so when Hugo made it. But I think you can't just say we got a program. Come to the program. You can't just say, we got a really nice church that's filled with programs for young people. Come to our church. You can't do that. You have to build relationships. And building relationships means that you got to open up the door and you have to go outside of wherever your program or wherever your church or organization is, and you have to develop relationships with people. Before you even say to them, come on and experience what we have where we are, you have to experience what they're going through. You have to build a relationship.
How do we start building that relationship? Some people are not good with dealing with other humans.
They are.
So.
Yeah. Oh Lord! Now you really touched on something there, Malika. This is not for everybody. It is not, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Because there are some people, I mean, in the years of experience that I've had in pastoral ministry and working with NAACPs and other towns and all of that, I have learned that the human personality is as diverse as anything else on earth. And there are human beings who are simply made and designed, you know, to work in silos. They work well all by themselves. But as soon as you make an effort to put them with somebody, to put them on a team or to have them go out, then their whole world begins to fall apart. Well, some people are like that. You know, that's okay. Don't try to change that person. If that's the gift that God has given them, then they're not the ones to be the leader of an effort that's trying to go out and bring people in. They might be the ones to stay inside and write about it. They might be the ones to stay inside and develop information technology pieces, Twitter and Instagram, you know, and Facebook, and develop these pages to talk about it. But they may not necessarily be the ones to go out and say, hey, young people, let's develop a relationship. But there are plenty of people who live that way as well. There are just as many people who love that, and that is their gift and that is their energy, to be able to go out and to work with others, to work in mutual cooperation, you know, and everybody's like that. Now, Malika, I mean, it's really weird, I'm telling you, because even in the church, I know pastors, and I think that I'm one of them. You know, by nature, I'm an introvert. By nature, you know, I was born and raised the youngest of 9, big, loud family, you know, loving and all of that. I was always trying to find my space, you know, trying to find my individual place in life, which made me an introvert. I was most comfortable with a book, going and climbing a tree somewhere. But because I feel like God gave me this thing, which is called ministry, then I had to sort of come outside of that box, which was natural for me, and to begin to become much more of an extrovert. You know, I married an extrovert, so you know, Sydney is a social human being, you know, and all of that, which is really beautiful, and I thrive on that. But I think that's what we have to do, getting back to our young boys and our boys and our young men, is we have to figure out what gifts and talents we have, and then we have to come together and create a team, and then we have to go out to where they are and say, this is your team. You know, that saying, each one teach one to reach one, is a very real possibility, but we should never just be satisfied with one. You know, if we've got 250 black boys that are entering as freshmen at ETHS. And of those 250 boys, I'm just being general here, as these statistics are not correct, but of those 250 boys, if 200 of them have some deficiency issues when it comes to reading and all of that, then we should never be satisfied in just reaching one or a couple or 10 or 20. We should work until every single one of those 200 young boys have a support system and a network that is going to catch them up when they're in high school and get them to reading progressively in that grade level by the time they graduate. So when graduation comes, they can go to college just like anybody else and succeed. If they don't want to go to college, if they want to go somewhere else, that's their business. But we ought to at least have that as an option for them by working to help them be successful. Yeah.
You put a lot on my mind.
Well,
I got some work to do. More work to do.
as we all do, Malika. As we all do. Yeah, bless you.
More work to do. So, I can go on and on this topic. We might have to do a
part two.
Part two on this.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
But what else do you want to get out there? Because there could be some young black men watching this later on today. What would you say to them? And you know what would you advise them to say to other young black men who might be in trouble, who might be having self-worth issues? Maybe they can talk to each other.
Right. Well, the key is to get them to talking to each other about the kind of issue that you just brought up, a self-worth issue, a self-esteem issue. When they're talking to each other, then certain things are going to come out. And a couple of the things that come out is why you feel that way. What makes you feel unworthy? What makes you question your esteem? And when we're able to do that, then you begin picking away. It's almost like a psychologist, I suppose. And you begin to help to reveal what is the raw issue that this young man or young boy is facing, that we might be able to identify and to assist and help. And the other thing I would say for anybody that is listening, especially boys and young men, you're not alone. It's really, it is a challenge to be a man in this society and in this world, because you're taught. It's a challenge to be a woman too. Don't get me wrong, but I'm talking about black men right now. It may be more of a challenge to be a sister, no doubt. But in this dialogue about black men, it's a challenge being a black man, because our society and our world generally are the ones who define these larger than life expectations of what a man should be anyway. And so you grow up thinking, a man is supposed to be the single provider of his family. The man is supposed to be the tough one. The man is supposed to not cry. The man is supposed to be, stern, and all of these false kinds of things that society teaches about a man, almost like you're a Marvel comic superhero, are sort of challenging your self-value and your self-esteem when you recognize, I don't fit the bill for any of these. Well, guess what? You're not alone. No man does. That's not what a man is. A man is very much like any other human being, and you kind of are a sort of hodgepodge of all sorts of emotions. You're strong, but sometimes you're weak. You laugh, but sometimes you cry. You're happy, but sometimes you're sad. You go out and you're doing it and turning the world upside down, and you succeed, but sometimes you trip and fall and fail. All of that sort of comes together to make up the composite material element of what a man is and what a human being is. And when you find out what that is, see, the thing is, when you can find a measure of satisfaction and a measure of contentment in your failures and in your losses, to me, that's what makes a man. Because when you're able to do that, and you're able to say, I failed, but guess what? It's not going to bend me or break me. I lost this time, but guess what? I'm going to get back up. Then those moments of success and those moments of victory will take you to higher heights than you've ever imagined before. So you got to find contentment in every aspect of your life.
Okay, one last question. I'm going to let you go.
Oh.
Now, I had spoken to a group of young men, and let me tell you, their faces lit up when it was time to talk about relationships. Matter of fact, they brought up relationships.
Okay.
And I just find it, they were in high school. I just find it interesting. They are really focused on either finding love or going through a bunch of women. I mean, I don't know if that's just a man thing. That could be white, black. It could be any man with that kind of mentality. But it was like it was already set to treat a woman a particular kind of way. And I know that goes back to the value. They don't see value in themselves, and they're not going to see value in the black woman. And they were so young. They were young. But what I found in the OGA program, when I talked to those young men, because they're not in high school yet, they have such, all of them, the ones that I talked to, had such a high regard for women. Like, they want relationships too, but they spoke about women in a total different way. Totally, being in that program. And I had asked Officer Howard, I said, so are you all talking to them about women? Because they sounded very mature on the subject. And they're not even in high school yet. And he said, well, we've talked to him, but, he kept that's amongst the boys. We can't share that information with you.
Right.
But I love whatever it is that they're telling them. It was beautiful because they had such respect, and they're looking for such a healthy relationship with a woman.
Beautiful.
But the other young men, I was concerned.
Right. Well, well, Malik, I think the first thing that you have to ask, if you're concerned about boys and young men and what their thought processes are in terms of developing relationships and treating young women and all of that, the first thing that you have to ask is who is their model? Who is the example that they are seeing that is making them say, I want to be like this, and I want to do this. So I very much believe that the best way a relationship can begin and develop and grow is when two people look at another couple that they know, who's generally older than them, that they want to be like. That they say, I think that's a good example of how, I want to be like that when I get older. I want to treat you like that. I want you to look at me the way she looks at him. That sort of thing. And of course, the first point of departure usually, it's supposed to be in the home, and we know it's not always in the home anymore. You look at the statistics and you look at the single parent families and all of that. So you don't typically have a father and a mother, as the first example that a young boy might see in terms of how he's supposed to treat a young woman, how he's supposed to feel about her, how he's supposed to talk to her, and all of that. So what happens then is it goes back to what we were talking about before, and how men have to go out and find ways to develop relationships with these young boys. And I'm going to go back to Officer Howard. I think those kinds of discussions then are really sort of germane. It's what a man says to a boy in terms of that relationship. And I would hope and pray that that in 2018, what responsible black men are saying to young boys about relationships is not the same as what I was taught when I was a boy coming up in the 60s and 70s. Because in the 60s and 70s, it was not about at least what I was learning from men. What was not about love and long-term relationship, but it was about conquest, and that sort of thing. So I think that the thing that helped me, was being a religious kid, and being all off in the church at a very early age. But those in my generation, I think that all of us, to a degree, including myself, all of us suffered, because I do not think that we had the right kind of lessons on how we are supposed to revere and respect and treat the women that we fall in love with and that we form a relationship with. Now, the other thing that helped me, Malik, I do want to say this, and it's very rare. I did have 6 older sisters.
Oh, that helps.
Yeah. So I did have 6 older sisters.
So they were straightening you out.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They pointed out the bad girls and the good girls, and you better treat that good girl right.
That's right. That's right. So they were very helpful, very loving, very instructive, and even just listening to them talk about their relationships when they were many years older than me. But listening to them as a child that was forming my own sense of identity helped me to understand, well, I don't want to be like that.
Right.
They're really talking about that guy and what he did. I don't want to be like that. I want to be different. And that's what we have to challenge many of our young boys now with today. You challenge them to be different. Different is often better. Yeah.
Okay, I like that. Okay, I'm going to let you go.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Monica.
Brenda Price wants you to know, I hope you two continue to share on this topic because so many young men think they are alone, and often young people think that whatever's happened to them has only happened to them.
Oh my goodness!
Yes.
My dear friend Brenda from all the way from Detroit, been a friend of mine for over 20 years. So it's definitely good to see that she's looking on. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. Another episode of Nabors Speaks. And what do we talk about next week? It'll be something.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.